Okay, well, good morning. Good morning, folks on Facebook. I know, Heather, you always tune in, so good to see you here. Thank you for you folks coming. It's good to have an actual live audience. so, so that's a good thing. We are going to go on a cruise to Rome this morning. Acts 27, a very memorable cruise. This Acts 27 really, and part of 28, could probably be made into a novel. I mean, this is one of those, Moby Dick type of novels, right? Hello, Sabra. No, you're good. Oh, I thought we'd moved that chair out of the way for you. Okay. All righty. Well, Acts 27. So let's start reading the first 12 verses. First 12 verses is wind and warning. So let's read that. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from I practiced this and now I can't get to quite right. At any rate, at Adramyttium, about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia. And we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. The next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so they might provide for his needs. From there we put out to sea again and passed to the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myrna in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving in Cnidus. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete, opposite Salmon. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens, near the town of Lasea. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also." But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete, facing both southwest and northeast. So if you do not have a map, let me get them for you because you are really going to want one. So I will just slide that way for you guys. Okay, yeah. Because this really is visually oriented this morning. You know, he mentions all of these places. So the journey to Rome has been decided. Paul, along with some other prisoners, are handed over to the emperor's guard to be taken to Rome. So the guard is a centurion of the imperial regiment. His name is Julius. The imperial regiment was the emperor's own regiment of soldiers. So they were taking Paul from the provincial soldiers and taking charge of him from the imperial soldiers. Julius's name, it's a Greek Roman name. It's likely it probably means he or his family were likely given Roman citizenship during the time of Julius Caesar. So many names came about that way. So they would have been given the name Julius because they became Roman citizens under Julius Caesar. So that may or may not be the case, but that is likely the background there. The ship they're going on is a coastal ship. It's one meant just to cruise around the coast. It's not an open sea type of ship. So this isn't, the type of ship that you would cross an ocean with or go into. This is the type of ship you'd want to know where the shore was. You get too far from the shore and you're in trouble. It's a coastal trading ship. It doesn't carry a lot of cargo, and it stops from point to point to point kind of thing. It's an Adramyttium ship. Adramyttium is a seaport in Mysia. You see it there on your map. Go to Asia, okay, and it's at the top of Asia there. Okay, you see that? Adramyttium. Okay, so that's where that ship is home. Its home port is in Adramyttium. So the owners of the ship would probably live there, and that's where it was. That's where it lies in port when it's not doing anything, kind of thing. It's sailing to various ports along the coast, and obviously this isn't the ship that can take them to Italy, but the centurion knows that he's going to find a grain ship going to Italy from one of these ports. Rome received their grain from Alexandria, and we're gonna hear about Alexandria. Alexandria on the bottom of your map is in Egypt. Okay, so if you see Egypt there's Alexandria. Egypt provided most of the grain for the Roman Empire. And so regular shipments of grain came from Alexandria over to Italy. So the centurion knows that he's going to pick up a grain ship somewhere along the way. But he's taken this small little coastal boat to get him there because that's all that's available. It's interesting, Aristarchus goes with Paul. Aristarchus is a friend of Paul, became Paul's attendant. It's likely he purchased his own ticket and went with Paul as a fellow traveler. The other option was he would have gone with Paul posing as Paul's slave, which is a possibility. But at any rate, it shows quite a great devotion of Aristarchus to Paul, right? I mean, this isn't a, hey, you want to come with me on a trip for a week up to wherever. This is, hey, Paul, I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know how long you're going to be in Rome. I don't know when we're ever coming back. But Paul, I am going to personally attend to your needs because you need someone with you. So Aristarchus gives his life to the building of the kingdom of God by being a traveling companion to Paul. So Aristarchus isn't a guy who's preaching, he's not teaching. Aristarchus is serving Paul's needs, saying, look, Paul, I will go wherever you go and I will take care of your needs. So that's quite a commitment for Aristarchus. And then notice, Luke is writing the book, and Luke says it was decided that we would sail for Italy, and we boarded a ship in verse 2. So Luke is with them. It's not Paul going alone. Paul has Aristarchus, and he has his personal physician. So if Bill was a little younger, I would ask Bill to be my personal physician and come to Rome with me. But there again, it shows Luke's commitment to the building of the kingdom of God through attending to the health and strength of Paul. That's pretty amazing. I mean, he's given up his own life to serve the gospel with Paul. And it could be that Luke signed on as the ship's doctor, or it could be that he just purchased his travel ticket as a companion to Paul. But Paul's not alone either way. Aristarchus is, maybe he's cooking for him, maybe he's washing his clothes, maybe hey, what do you need, Paul? I'll get it from the market. He's that guy freeing Paul up to do what Paul does. And Luke is there with Paul saying, Paul, your health hasn't been all that great, and you get beat up a lot, so you need me, which is pretty amazing. So I think I need both an Aristarchus and a Luke. So I don't know if anyone knows an Aristarchus or Luke, let me know, because when I start traveling, I'm not doing it alone. So Bill, you might be coming with me the first few trips. We'll see. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So anyway, they head off from Caesarea to Sidon. Sidon is 69 miles north up the coast from Caesarea. And you can see that on your map. That's their first stop. They stay there for a short time because it is a merchant vessel. And so they're probably dropping off cargo, doing a bit of trade, picking up new cargo, going to the next port, that kind of thing. And the centurion allows Paul to leave the ship and meet with the churches there in Sidon. So that's pretty encouraging, Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so they might provide for his needs. So the friends there, the churches there, they would know that Paul's got a long journey ahead, and they would supply him with food and whatever he needs for clothing, and maybe some parchments and candles or whatever Paul would need. Because Paul still is a prisoner. He's a Roman citizen, so he doesn't have the same kind of prisoner status as some of the other prisoners who were there because they had charges against them. Paul was, he could have been set free if he didn't ask to see Caesar. So the centurion knows that. He knows who Paul is, and he's a Roman citizen and treats him well. It's likely that Julius still sent a guard to go with Paul. Like, Julius was still a centurion. He still had a duty to perform, and if anything happened to Paul, whether Paul, ran away on his own or someone tried to, kidnap him to escape, Julius has to pay the penalty for that. And he's part of the imperial guard. You don't get to be the imperial guard by being slack in your duty. So he's not going to let Paul go by himself. He's probably got a guard or two with Paul. And I think he knows that Paul's not a flight risk. But still. So they begin their journey. Now, the dangerous season for sailing began about September 14th and lasted till November 11th. After November 11th, after, the first, second week in November, all navigation on the open sea came to an end until winter was over. So there's this time which is dangerous. You can still travel, you can still be on the open sea, and you'll get away with it from September, middle of September to middle of November, somewhere around that range, but it's dangerous. And anything can happen. So you take your chances when you travel during those times. So right now they're pushing their luck to sail. They are, where did my dates go? They said it was after Atonement, right? There we go. So the Day of Atonement in that year happened October 5th. So they were middle of October. So it's the dangerous season is middle of September till middle of November. And they're nearing the end of that dangerous season. They're risking quite a bit to travel. If it's an early winter, if it's a bad fall, you shouldn't be traveling. So they're somewhere probably the middle of October. And so that's why, Paul knows they're pushing his luck. Like, Paul Paul has been on 3 missionary journeys. He's taken a lot of boats. Paul knows about sailing. It's not like he's standing up and saying, hey, I have no idea how do you sail this thing, but it seems to me it's not a good idea. Paul knows. He's been on a lot of boats. He sailed from Caesarea to Ephesus. He's taken this route 3 times, there and back. So he knows about the seas. He knows. He's a smart guy. He gets that. It's interesting that on his second and third journey, they actually sail on the bottom around Cyprus, at the bottom of Cyprus. And that's the normal way to sail. So I think in some of your old maps, you will see that. Actually, in the back of your Bibles, if you have a good Bible, you'll have maps as well, and you'll be able to see that. Normally, you sail from Sidon or Caesarea at the bottom of Cyprus. You don't go around the coast like that because it takes so much longer, right? You okay, Don? Okay. So Paul stands up and recommends that they stay. Says, guys, I just don't think this is a good idea that we end up sailing here. So let's not do this. And he says to them, very clearly, says to him, we're gonna do this at great peril, and we're gonna lose this ship. And we're going to lose cargo, and we're going to lose lives. So this just doesn't make sense. I don't think we should do this. But of course, the captain of the ship and the owner of the ship both say, nah, we can make it. Obviously the captain and the owner want this to happen. This is their livelihood, right? So I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? I jumped way ahead. Okay, back it up. Sorry. Okay, so they sail up the coast. Goodness. And they go on the lee side of Cyprus because the prevailing west winds were against them. That time of year, the winds normally came from the west, the prevailing winds from the west. So they weren't able to go directly into the wind because it was a coastal ship. Can't manage in the high winds in the open seas. So they go up the leeward side of Cyprus. That is the side that's more sheltered from the wind. So they end up in Myra, but that's much later than they expect because it took them longer to sail around Cyprus. They weren't going very fast. The port of Myra was one of the chief ports of the imperial grain service. So the Alexandrian ships would generally cross the Mediterranean Sea and port in Myra. And you can see Myra there. And then from there, they would head over to Italy. So they would either unload their grain in that Asia area, or they would head over to Italy for unloading there. So from Myra, they decide they're going to get on the grain ship. And of course, it's the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard has the authority. Grain ships are not cruise ships. You don't see grain ships going up to Alaska. Hey, can we have a berth on your grain ship? I want to see Alaska. Not going to happen. But the Imperial Guard says, hey, we need to get to Italy. We're taking your best rooms, so move over. So they head out. And remember, this is late in the year. It is the dangerous time. It's probably one of the last sailings that's going to happen on the way to Italy. So once again, their route is altered because of bad weather, heavy winds. The prevailing winds are against them, and so they make it to Cnidus, And you can see that on your map there. They make it to Nidus. Normally, you would head from Myra, and you wouldn't go up above the island of Rhodes and into Nidus. You would go around the other way. But because of the winds, they decided to hang out nearer the coast. Now, remember, these are not big grain vessels that you see today that, you see going through the Suez Canal and all that kind of. They're boats that have sails on them. So the only way they're moving is with sails. You don't have a bunch of guys on oars. You don't have an engine. You have sails. So if the prevailing winds are coming from the area you want to get to, you're doing all this tacking, right? So it takes you a lot longer. And that's one of the reasons why you just didn't sail, because winter came and the winds blew harder and harder, and you just couldn't go against the winds. Nowadays, you just crank up the engine and away you go, kind of thing. So they had to go, and then from Nidus, they went around Crete. They went to the south of Crete because they could not hold their course with the westerly winds. They just couldn't go straight against the winds. So they thought, okay, we'll go around the lee side of Crete and maybe make it there, get a bit of break from the wind. The wind will pass, we'll port there, and we should be able to go. So they land at a place called Fair Havens. Sounds like a senior's living place, doesn't it? They're at Fair Havens, port on the southern side of the island of Crete. It is somewhat protected from the westerly winds, but much time has been lost because of the slow sailing. So it's now it is after the Day of Atonement. Year 59 AD, the Day of Atonement fell on October 5th. Okay, so it's dangerous. Not a good plan to be sailing. Now my papers are out of order. Okay, there we go. Back at it. So they have a very short window. It's now October, middle of October, after the day of Passover. We don't know how many days, but it's probably middle of October. They have until stretching it at the most 3 weeks to sail. They know it's dangerous. All navigation on the open sea after 3 weeks is impossible. They don't want to stay in Fair Havens. This is where Paul stands up and says, where is it? Where does he say that? Verse 10. Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also. But the centurion, who's the guy who's going to make the decision because he's in charge, he consults with the captain and the owner of the ship, and they decide, nope, let's do it, because they want to at least get to Phoenix. Phoenix is a port on Crete. It's a better port. They determine that the harbor of Fair Havens is not a suitable port because it faces just one way. The harbor of Phoenix faces both southwest and northwest. So you have two ways. There's actually two harbors in the Phoenix port. So lots of ships harbor there, lots of room. If the winds are favorable, you can head down south. If the winds are favorable, you can go up north. So Phoenix is the better place to harbor. So they figured they were going to winter in the harbor of Phoenix. Okay, so they say, since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete facing both southwest and northwest. So that's what they want to do. They're going to go to Phoenix. They decide, yeah, it's too dangerous now. The weather's bad. This is an early winter. We had such a terrible time trying to get here. Let's just winter in Phoenix. It's a bigger city than Lasea. It's a better place. They probably have imperial connections there. So it's just a better place to go to. So they're there. And let's read the next little segment, verse 13. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called a northeaster swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Because they were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. So, not a good cruise to be on. This is more than the sea's a little rocky. I'm having trouble eating. I can't go to the dining room, right? So they get this favorable wind. They're in fair havens. They just want to go up the coast to Crete and winter there. So they wait, and this gentle south breeze begins to blow, and they think, okay, this is it. This is what we need. It's all we need to get around there. So they take off. But upon rounding the coast of Crete, they're hit by this hurricane-force wind. It's called a nor'easter. So I know I said that the prevailing winds are from the west. So we got some confusion, right? Prevailing winds are from the west. They get a gentle south wind coming up, which is normally, your summer Mediterranean breeze. But the nor'easter, it comes down from, it's called Mount Idu from Crete, and it picks up speed as it comes down the mountain, and it comes from the north. And because of where the island's situated and everything, it's coming from the north, hits the mountain, picks up speed, and it's got hurricane force winds that whistle down the mountain across the land into the ocean. And so they round the corner and they get hit by this nor'easter. And they cannot sail against it. It's just impossible. It's a hurricane force. They've only got sails. The nor'easter was called Eurakilo. It sounds Spanish, but it's not. Euros is Greek word meaning east wind, and akilo is Latin meaning north wind. So they actually named it a Greek Latin name, Eurakilo. So it was a common phenomenon that happened. The wind would come off of the island of Crete down Mount Ido, and sailing was not possible. So there's the currents met, the northeaster's coming, it hits the prevailing west winds, you've got this gentle southern breeze coming, and they all hit each other, and, it's like, in certain times of the year, you're trying to figure out what direction the wind's coming from, and all it's doing is swirling around. And you're watching the clouds going, I think now they're going, now what? Right? Or one cloud's going that way, and some others are going that way, and the wind's blowing a totally different direction. You're thinking, oh, that's bad. And they navigated by the stars and the sun, yes. So they were in trouble. So they get hit by all these winds coming together, hurricane winds, throws them into the open ocean. They can't make Phoenix. So they go around the lee side of Cauda. Cauda, you see that island right there just off of Crete? So they managed to get there, and Cauda was 23 miles west of Crete. So the sailors make a run for the leeward side of Cauda. They make it there, And the winds they're a little lessened because they're on the leeward side. And so they begin to make further preparations for the storm ahead, okay? Because there is no place to anchor. They're being pushed along. Maybe they take the sails down a little bit. They bring in the lifeboat. Usually, a lifeboat was towed behind them, okay? So they towed it behind them. But it's this storm, and the waves are crashing, and the lifeboat's being filled with water. So it's getting heavy. So it's becoming a drag on the ship. So they got to bring the lifeboat in because they know they're going to hit open seas, and then if that lifeboat starts sinking, they have to cut the rope on the lifeboat, or else it's going to drag them under. So they want to save the lifeboat because lifeboats are, what saves you. So they drag the boat in, and Paul says that was no easy task, right? Where does it say that? We were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure in verse 16. So the men hoisted it aboard, and then they put ropes under the ship so they would hold it together. That also was a common practice at the time. So they passed the cables underneath the hull of the ship to keep it from breaking apart. It gave it a bit more strength. It's like duct taping. Okay? So anyway, Pliny, who's a Roman historian, talked about the chief plague of sailors breaking up the spars of the hull itself. If you're out in these storms, it was enough to break up the hull of the boat. So ancient vessels all carried with them cables that were already and ready to be fitted for the bracing of hulls to enable them to resist the destructive force of those winds. So I have no idea how they would have secured those cables. Like, somebody obviously would have had to go underneath. Man, I don't know how they did that, but they could have been just loose and had to be tightened up. Yeah, you would think that would make more sense. Yeah, I don't know. I know that the English Navy back in the 1600s did similar things like that. And men would have to jump into the water and swim underneath and secure them. Mm-hmm. There you go. Huh, okay. Evidently, you're a sailor. Okay, excellent. All right, we're going to look to you today, Don. All right. So they pass those things. So they bring in the lifeboat. They secure the cables. And third, they lowered the anchor so as to prevent the ship from being driven into the quicksands off of the African coast, west of Cyrene. So you see where Cyrene is there, bottom of your map, more towards the left, Cyrene. There were dangerous sandbars around that area. And they knew that if this nor'easter kept pushing them that way, they were going to crash into these sandbars and rip the ship to shreds. So they still have the sails up because they're trying to control the direction of where they're going. The nor'easter is beginning, they're getting a little bit out of the effects of the nor'easter at this time, but they're being hit by the west winds. So it's still this storm they have. So they want to slow down their progress, so they throw out the anchor. So it drags. It's a controlled drag so they can keep doing their tacking and getting to where they need to be. It's estimated that the rate of travel would have been about 1.5 miles an hour. So that's not very fast. You can walk faster than that, backwards. And the direction was about 18 degrees north and west. So they were doing everything they could to try to... They were sailors. They knew where they had to go. And they knew where they didn't want to end up. So the storm continues to batter the ship. It's not over yet. The next day, they take the drastic measure of throwing the cargo overboard. Maybe a lot of the grain that was being carried, it's hard to say because we find out in verse 38 that says, when they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. So at this point, they're throwing cargo overboard, whatever that cargo is. It might have been some of the grain. It might have been personal trade goods. It might have been, all that kind of stuff. They're throwing it overboard because they want to lighten the load. They're taking on water. They don't want to sink. They want to be able to control this ship with their sails, and so they got to get higher up in the water. So they're throwing the cargo overboard, and not only, that's pretty drastic because that's a loss of income, a loss of wages for the sailors. I mean, if you don't get there with your cargo, you don't get paid. So you got paid when you got there. You didn't get paid upon taking it. So they're throwing away their income. That's pretty drastic, right? I don't care if I get paid. I just want to live. At this point, it's not about money. It's about my life. And on the third day out, they even throw out the ship's tackle. They throw out their tools, right? They know that none of this stuff is going to help us. And Luke says, with their own hands, really emphasizing the fact that this is their tools of the trade by which they make money, and they threw it away. It's like a carpenter throwing away his tool belt and all of his tools from the back of his truck because it's not about that anymore. I got to save my life. And so they've thrown out their cargo. They're not going to get an income, and they're throwing out the ship's tackle. It's going to cost them a lot of money to get that back, to get back into business. But at this point, it's not about getting back into business. It's about saving their lives. So they throw all their tackle board overboard. They were desperate. And still the storm continues for many more days. We know from verse 20 that not verse 20. Where are we? Verse 27, on the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea. The 14th night, let's read 21 and get an idea here for timing. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed. Last night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island.' On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea when about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land." So we'll get there in a minute. So here they are. The sun and the stars have not appeared for many days. They have no idea where they are. They've given up all hope of being saved. These veteran sailors who have made this trip umpteen times know where they're going, what they're doing. They're throwing up their hands and saying, "We're dead. It's only a matter of time before this ship breaks apart. We run aground. We're sunk. There's nothing that can be done. We've done our best. Been good knowing you, boys. We had a good run. See you later," kind of thing. So we don't know what day it is. We do know that they throw out the tackle on the third day. So this could be the fourth day, the fifth day, after they'd gone a long time without food, 4, 5, 6 days. What is a long time without food? If you talk to a teenager, it's 3 hours. But it's hard to say. My guess, it's probably day 6, 7, or 8, somewhere in there. So the storm continues. They're desperate. They don't know where they are, and so the only hope is to make landfall somewhere, and they don't know where they are. So how do you make landfall when you don't know where land is? And how do you make it gently when you have no idea what's underneath you, right? So, what's that? God only knows. And I think that's why all of a sudden we get God entering the story, right? Paul stands up and he addresses the crew. Amazing that Paul, being a prisoner, is now the guy in charge, right? Once again, we see the authority that God gives Paul through the Holy Spirit. And he says, I love that. He says, you should have taken my advice not to sail, right? Yeah, I told you this was going to happen. Now, you read that, and you think to yourself, wait a minute, I was always taught that you don't gloat, that you don't say, I told you so, right? So what's Paul doing? Is Paul gloating? No, I don't think so. I think Paul is saying, hey, you need to understand that I know what I'm talking about. You need to understand that not only do I know what I'm talking about, but the God who is with me knows what he's doing. You need to understand that I know things that you can't possibly know. I think that's what he's doing. I think Paul is standing up and saying, okay, I was right the first time, and I want to let you know I'm going to be right this time too, because I know who God is. And the God whom I serve, you know all about the God whom I serve, because more than likely Paul's been telling him about it the whole time, right? I've talked to God. An angel of God came to me and said, here's what you need to know. I need to speak to Caesar. He said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get there. I'm not going to die. And I love the way he puts that. Do not be afraid. God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. What is Paul saying to them? Because and I know, it seems like a strange question, but because of God working through Paul. Paul's really saying, dudes, if I'm not here, you aren't living. The reason you are alive, the reason we're going to get there is because of my relationship with God. Right? That's really what he's saying. You're lost. You've already thrown up your hands and said, we have no hope. We're lost. Nothing can save us now. And Paul says, oh, that's not true. I wonder. Yes, I would like to know. And the story really doesn't tell us. Even going into chapter 28 doesn't tell us. But I think that's very interesting that I think Paul is very clearly saying, I know what I'm talking about because I know what you don't know. Because I have a relationship with God, and that means something in life. And it means something in this situation. And with all of your sailing knowledge and all of your ability to do stuff, you can't. You're lost. But I want to tell you that with God, we're found. We're okay. We're going to make it. God promised this to me. So keep your courage. I believe God will do what he says he will do. I'm a man of faith in God, and if you don't trust God, trust me. Right? If you don't believe a word I say about God and you don't think there's a God, you can at least trust me because I know there's a God. What choice do they have? Right? I mean, they don't. So, okay, they're glad to get a bit of encouragement. They're glad that someone stood up and said, I just heard from God, the God of the universe, the creator God, Jesus, the Messiah, God with skin on, I just heard from him. And none of your lives will be lost. We'll all be saved. Now, that's pretty amazing. But he does say, But understand, we're not just going to float there in safety, and one day we're going to wake up in the sunshine and go, oh, we're here. He does say, nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. So there's still some work that has to be done, boys. Don't give up. Keep sailing. Call up all your energy, call up all your strength, call up all your knowledge, because we still got to sail this thing. And yes, we're going to hit land. And yes, we're going to hit pretty hard. And yes, we're going to lose this ship, but you will not lose your lives. That's God's guarantee to you, and I will put my life on the line to guarantee you that. That's a man that can stand up because he's heard from God, because he has a relationship. He has faith. He's walked with God. He knows who the Holy Spirit is, and he trusts him. So, verses 27 and on. On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea. When about midnight, the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, the took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved. So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away. How about that? Who's in charge of this show? It's clearly Paul. So they're still being driven across the Adriatic. Don't know where they are. No sun, no stars, just being driven. They sense they're coming towards land. I asked a guy who's a ship's captain, and I said, how is that even possible? He said, well, when you sail long enough, you know the ebb and flow of the waves. You feel the water under you. And when you're in deep water, it's a different feeling than when you're in shallower water. And the waves have a different feel, and the boat has a different feel when you start getting in shallower water. And the closer you get to the shore, the rougher the water is, because there's less room between the bottom and the waves, and so the power of the waves, it pushes the waves higher, and so there's more this going on, and it crashes against the rocks or whatever, and there's force coming at you this way. And so the closer you get, the more rocky things get, and the boat bounces around a little bit more. But in deep water, it's more smooth. So even in the storm, they can feel there's a change in the way the boat is reacting to the water. And they can feel there's a change in the way the water feels. I said, well, is it intuition? And he says, well, it's not intuition, but it almost becomes intuition after you've sailed long enough. And they're just things that you pick up and you don't realize you know them anymore. You had to learn them at one point in time, but you've been doing it for so long, you just know it. I'm sure if you talk to Dan, he would say similar things. You just know the water. What do you mean you know the water? Well, you just do. You can feel it underneath you. You just understand how your boat is behaving. So they knew they were getting near water or near land, and that was very concerning. Because as it gets shallower, they know that they're drifting towards land, and they don't know where they're drifting. Are they going to hit rocks and be torn apart? What's going to happen? And so they feel this is a more dangerous situation because now they're nearing land and their boat's going to be torn apart. And that's a bad thing. At least they're still bobbing around in the open sea. And maybe eventually the storm will lift and they'll be alive. But the storm hasn't lifted, and now they're moving towards some sort of land mass, and they don't know what it is, and it's fearful. So a bunch of the sailors want to get off the boat. They want to get into the lifeboat. They figure, hey, we're close enough to land that we'll just stay on the same tack, and the lifeboat doesn't draw as much water, so when we see rocks and sand, we'll be much better off. And so they pretend they're lowering the anchors, and Paul says to the centurion, okay, here's the deal. If you let those guys go and they leave this boat, you will not live. Right? And I don't know if it's a threat to say that's what God told me, but I think Paul's pretty practical. The only way this boat is going to sail is if the sailors stay. Right? We need their expertise. We need these guys to suck it up, Buttercup, and stay in the boat and get us there as safe as possible. And if these guys leave, it's not going to happen. Well, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and they have 4 anchors out at this point and trying to slow things down and not crash into anything with great force. And yeah, so Paul steps in and kind of commands the centurion and he tells his soldiers, cut the ropes. I wonder what that would have looked like, that scene, right? The sailors going, what are you doing? Are you guys stupid? We're the sailors. We know what we're doing. And the centurion says, no, I'm in charge here. And this guy, his God, says, stay in the boat. We're going to make it, so I'm going to trust him. Right. Yeah. And I think they're learning it by Paul's faith. And there he is. Paul has authority on the boat. So it's soon to be dawn. So the lifeboat's gone. They can't escape anymore. Probably a pretty ugly scene. And verse 33, just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Notice he tells them again, you're going to survive. You need to eat. Not all is lost. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head. After he had said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. So Paul wants to encourage them just before dawn. He knows that, this day when light breaks, we have some work to do. And fellas, I know you're discouraged about the lifeboat, but I told you, not one of you is going to die. You will not lose a single hair from your head. So let's eat something because you got work to do. So he breaks bread in front of them all, prays, gives them encouragement and courage, and they eat. And they eat as much as they want. And when they had eaten, they said, okay, we don't need the grain anymore. We don't need food anymore. Get rid of it. We're heading towards shore. Let's get up in the water as much as we can. Let's, help our chances as much as we can, kind of thing. So there's this practical wisdom working along with God's promises here. So they, at daylight, they saw land in verse 39. They did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach, where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow struck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. So you got one last scene happening here. They all eat, 276 of them. I did not, 276. That's a big ship with a lot of people. That's a lot of crew. That's a lot of prisoners. That's a lot of soldiers. And that makes Paul's promise to them even bigger. Not one of you will be lost. Not one of you. That's 276 of them. If there's 10 of them, that's easy. 276? Wow. So they see land. They don't recognize it. I don't know where we are, but it's land. So there's a sandy beach. That's better than a rocky beach. That's better than a cliff face. So let's go for it. So they cut loose the anchors. They let loose the rudder, and they head for the beach. And there they go. Life is good. We're going to make it until, right? They hit the sandbar. They probably do everything they can to try to get loose of the sandbar, but it's useless, and the back of the ship is being broken apart. We are not going to sail anymore. We're done. The soldiers, as is their duty, if they cannot, they can't lose the prisoners. So they've got to kill them. Because if prisoners escape, then they're going to be killed. So they do what they're trained to do. Okay, we better kill all these prisoners because if we lose one of them, we're in trouble. Apparently, they didn't necessarily believe Paul. But the centurion does. And he doesn't want Paul to be killed. He recognizes that they are going to be safe because Paul is with them. He recognizes the authority that Paul has through God. Right? I mean, man. So the centurion goes against his own training, against everything that he knows. He puts his life on the line and his soldier's life on the line and says, you're not going to kill anybody. We are not going to follow protocol. You're going to trust me on this one because I trust Paul. I trust in Paul's God. And so everybody abandons ship. Those who can swim, get going. Others find some timbers that are broken up from the ship and kick your feet and you'll get there, kind of thing. This is where Bill and Mary's lifeguard training comes in. The paddle boards. Okay, here we go. And everybody reaches the shore safely. The 14th, we know at least 14th night they were still being driven across the Adriatic. I don't know how many days happen from, they know they're sensing land on the 14th day. Well, 14th night, so 15th day. So it seems like maybe this is the 15th day, just before dawn. Paul urged them to eat, and then they crashed in the sandbars. So 15 days, a little better, 2 weeks from Myra from Fair Havens, rather, 15 days from Fair Havens to Malta. That is one long, unexpected cruise. This is more than a COVID thing. They ended up in Malta. We're going to see in chapter 28, they end up in Malta, and they winter in Malta, and then when spring comes, they head to Rome. Right. They've got to probably wait for another grain ship to come by is probably what they have to do. Yeah. So they winter in Malta. And we'll see what happens in Malta. And Malta's not a big place, but that's where they end up. I'm sure nobody's going to say, hey, I think we can make Italy now. No, I'm not sailing anymore. We're done with this. So again, the Holy Spirit isn't mentioned, but underneath it all, you can see God at work. You can see the power of God's Spirit protecting them, providing for them, giving Paul the opportunity to stand up and direct these men towards God. This is a significant event to be saved, and I'm sure all of them went, man, there's no way we should have lived. There's just absolutely no way. And they'd tell their buddies and go, that's impossible. That doesn't happen. Just 3 weeks ago, one of the ships crashed and burned. They'd have all the stories about all the ships that are lost, and this one isn't. Well, what's the difference? Oh, it's just a guy named Paul. It is. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yes. This is why I think this would be an amazing movie, wouldn't it? This, yeah, it'd just be an amazing movie. At any rate, I don't want to get into 28, so we'll save that for next week. We might have 2 more sessions left. 28's our last chapter. Might break it up into 2. We'll see what happens. So, questions, comments before we leave? Well, if you're not convinced about God's sovereignty in your life, you should be after this. I mean, wow, God is sovereign. We often feel like we're blown all over the place and it's hopeless, right? Yeah, yeah. There's no hope. I'm throwing up my hands. There's nothing that can be done. In steps God. So, at any rate, yeah. So let me just pray and we're done. God, thanks. Thank you that you are sovereign. And thank you for this story to show us that in many ways. God, we look to you for your help in our life today and the days to come. So God, I don't know what ship we're on or what storm we're sailing, but I do know you. And so I pray, God, that you would break into our world and that you would let us know that you're sovereign and you've got us covered, and you'll be there for us, and you are. So God, thanks for this day. I pray that you would lead us and guide us and be sovereign for us. In your name I ask, Jesus. Amen. Amen. All right.